So we've chosen a particularly lively day in the Senate for this, but we have a considerable number of committee members scheduled to attend. We're just finishing up our caucus conversation on dealing with the continuing resolution, so it was a pretty significant conversation. Let me call to order this spotlight hearing of the Democrats on the Senate Environment Public Works Committee. Today's gathering is entitled Freezing America's Progress. Its purpose is to raise the profile of the harms caused in communities across the United States from the illegal funding freezes and deep uncertainty about federal investment in our collective future. I'm deeply appreciative of the witnesses we have here today to discuss these harms and making it clear that these actions are illegal and violate the Constitution. We're now in week 8 of the second Trump administration. In just 2 months, we've seen attacks on the rule of law, willful disregard for the Constitution, a funding freeze that is threatening to kill jobs and drive up energy costs for families, and trauma inflicted on dedicated career staff at various agencies. The list goes on. By the way, trauma is not my word, it's the word of Russell Vought, who intended the trauma. Trump has created enough chaos to throw our economy into disarray and stoke fears of an impending recession. The Atlanta Federal Reserve just warned that we are facing a 2.5% drop in GDP this quarter, the worst economic slump our country has seen since the second quarter of 2020, when Trump was last in office. Across the country, communities are reeling as Trump and his unelected billionaire co-president Elon Musk have taken a chainsaw to infrastructure funding, money-saving clean energy investments, and anti-pollution programs, all to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. The chaos and destruction may seem random, but Trump will do what he always does: reward friends and punish enemies. Pausing funding for discretionary grant programs at the Department of Transportation, leverage to reward friendly governors and punish those he doesn't like. Killing clean energy projects so extreme as to include ripping out already installed electric vehicle charging stations and selling back the federal EV fleet at a loss of $1 billion taxpayer dollars. Payback for his oil and gas donors who will sell more oil and gas. And while the Trump administration rewards fossil fuel donors and guts climate safety investments, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin's home in Suffolk County was on fire. On Long Island, fire season still has not officially started, but drought and dry conditions led to a brush fire over the weekend that burned 600 acres. With this chaos and destruction, Trump is violating legal contracts, trampling on the Constitution, ignoring the rule of law, and flouting court orders. We're here today to expose his destructive betrayal of the American people and to fight back. Today, we will hear more about the funding freezes, pauses, and attempted clawbacks at EPA and DOT, the legal lessons we can draw from this outrageous behavior, and the very real harms it is wreaking on American families and the economy. The targets of this wrath include programs for roads, bridges, light rail, and bike lanes, clean drinking water, home renovations that reduce household energy bills, flood mitigation projects, safer school buses, zero-emission vehicle charging stations, community centers where seniors and families can go during heat waves and dangerous storms, and money-saving clean energy projects, including solar and geothermal. In Rhode Island, the aging of our bridges is being exacerbated by climate change. Our Washington Bridge, a key artery, has been shut down for over a year. Small businesses on both sides of the span are suffering, and bottlenecked traffic causes misery for drivers. The project to replace the bridge was awarded grants from the MEGA and INFRA programs, but it is waiting still on both grants. The beautiful and historic Mount Hope Bridge requires upgrades to address the climate-driven corrosion of cables. It was awarded a grant from the PROTECT program that could extend the life of the bridge by up to 75 years and save hundreds of millions of dollars. But the grant agreements must be finalized to access the funds. 15 bridges on the I-95 corridor carrying 185,000 vehicles daily and billions of dollars worth of freight had a repair awarded funding from the Bridge Investment Program under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. But until the grant agreement is signed, there's no access to the funds. EPA initially froze all grant funds, including those already under contract and obligated, despite 2 federal courts ordering the administration to release funds. They even froze school bus rebates for buses already ordered and ready to be delivered. Companies made investments based on the obligation of this funding. They hired workers, they filled orders, they drew up plans. In the confusion, with funding so erratic and uncertain, contracts are defaulted, payroll is not made, jobs are lost, and local government budgets are strained. I call this disarray the fog bank, a fog of confusion, behind which the administration tries to violate court orders without a clear and specific act of contempt. I expect as litigation proceeds, we will discover this fog bank strategy was a calculated ploy. But court orders should be obeyed, not defeated through fog bank trickery. Then there's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Almost a year ago, long before the election, EPA awarded $20 billion to fund community, clean energy, and disaster resilience activities across the country, like Hampton, Virginia, near many naval and Air Force installations, which plans to invest in infrastructure to reduce flood risk, or Lee County, Florida, which plans to build community centers to house residents during extreme weather events. The recipients range from the Virginia coal fields to small towns across Georgia and North Carolina, the Lane County, Oregon, and the city of Waco, Texas, and the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe in northern Minnesota. After much consultation, EPA contracted with Citibank to help grantees leverage billions more in private investment. One major award of nearly $7 billion of GGRF funding is expected to attract 2 to 3 times this amount in private investment for projects to lower utility bills, reduce air pollution, and make us less dependent on foreign oil cartels. But EPA feels obliged to Trump to terminate this already obligated, congressionally authorized funding that will lower household energy costs, spur economic development, and reduce pollution. So here's what it looks like. It looks like EPA schemed with the Department of Justice to pretend that there was fraud. The pretext was so bad that the criminal chief of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia actually resigned rather than enforce DOJ's politically motivated order. So the Trump U.S. Attorney pursued it himself. As a former U.S. Attorney, I can tell you that almost never happens. It is a weird signal. And the judge denied the application, which also almost never happens. The Department of Justice's job going into the magistrate judge is to make sure that they have done it right so that we always get yes for an answer by virtue of doing the job right. This judge denied the application, another huge red flag. And the saga continued and continued, now with an unexplained and likely unpredicated FBI investigation. With Kash Patel in charge, it's hard to have much confidence that that's a legit investigation. And just last night, on the eve of a court hearing over Climate United's challenge to the freeze, EPA posts a video of Lee Zeldin claiming to cancel all $20 billion of the GGRF. Behind Trump's fog bank and pretexts, he and his unelected co-president Musk are simply stealing from the American people to pay for tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy. It is gangster government. So let me welcome our 4 participants. Our first is Professor Lisa Heinzeling, the Justice William J. Brennan Jr. Professor of Law at Georgetown Law. This is an especially fitting title for her since Professor Heinzeling clerked for Justice Brennan, as well as Judge Posner on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. If you don't know Professor Heinzeling, you know her work as the lead author on the plaintiff's briefs in the Massachusetts versus EPA litigation. That case, of course, established the proposition that greenhouse gases are pollutants under the Clean Air Act. Next is Mr. Kaylee Edgerly, President and CEO of Sunny Merriman Incorporated. Sunny Merriman is a commercial and school bus dealership that has been in business since 1967. In 2019, the Lynchburg, VA-based company made the decision to go in on electric buses, and it delivered its first electric school bus in 2020. Soon after, they hired Mr. Edgerly. This is just the latest chapter of his long career in the commercial vehicle space, starting at Detroit Diesel and more recently at Thomas Built Buses. Our third participant is Mr. Phil Aroniano. Got it? Mr. Aroniano has 20 years of experience in the climate and clean energy policy and finance sectors. Climate United is an investment fund formed by 3 experienced financial and community banking institutions. More than a year ago, EPA awarded Climate United nearly $7 billion in IRA funding to capitalize community investments across the country. Now, after the fact, Lee Zeldin is attempting to claw back the funds by throwing around baseless allegations of fraud, as I discussed. I will turn this over to my colleague from Maryland, who has arrived with exactly perfect timing, to introduce our final participant, the Honorable Calvin Ball, County Executive of Howard County, Maryland.
Perfect. Thank you.
Senator Alsovitz.
Thank you.